May the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be always acceptable in your sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. Please be seated. So this is a question for everybody. How many of you dream? Show of hands. How many dream? I dream for sure. Keep your hands up. How many of you remember your dreams? Sometimes. Right. Me too. Dreaming and dreams are fascinating. Scientists who study dreams say that when we dream, our brains are on fire, while the rest of our body is relaxed and regenerating for the next day. Our brains are worrying and stirring and processing bits of information that we have taken in during our waking hours and creating ways to deal with emotions or whatever is going on in our inner world. Now for me, for those of you who do remember dreams, you might be like me in that I remember the ones that are usually the ones that feel like they're really super real, or, sometimes there are things that are good and challenging ways to deal with problems. I remember one dream that I had some years ago that I actually turned into a short film for a seminary class. I was sitting somewhere outside in Tallahassee. The scene quickly shifted, and I was transported to one of the courtyards at St. John's Episcopal Church. Suddenly, I saw this flash of light, and the images of faces began popping up in my vision in rapid-fire succession. They were people of all genders and colors and ages and animals of every kind. And as it so happens so many times in my dreams, there was some narrator voice that wanted to direct my attention to something important. So, as these faces kept coming at me in rapid succession, the dream narrator intoned, "This is the face of God." When I woke up, I felt deeply moved by what I had heard and seen in my dream. I had a profound sense of the reality that God was in the face of every person, every creature. And in the words of Jonathan Myrick Daniels, we are indelibly and unspeakably one. I'll share with you, I had another dream this morning that was really bizarre because I was sent back to seminary for some reason to counsel a marital dispute with one of my seminary classmates, and I woke up going, "What in the world? I'm not there anymore! Leave me alone!" Today, we had a set of dreams from Joseph, visions that guided him to keep Mary and the newborn Jesus safe from a jealous and ruthless King Herod. Now, our gospel picked up at verse 13 of the second chapter of Matthew. Fortunately, the insert does have verses 1 through 12 as well. So just to give you a quick synopsis of what happens in those first 12 verses. Some wise men come to Jerusalem from the east looking to pay homage to the King of the Jews. Scholars believe that despite the popular hymn, "We Three Kings of Orient are," these men from the east were more likely scientists, astronomers specifically. There's a reason they've become enchanted by following this very bright light over Bethlehem. This star piqued their interest, and somehow they knew it signified someone important had been born. King Herod the Great is not happy to hear that there is some rival out there in the hinterlands, and asks these Gentile strangers to please let him know where this newborn king might be so he might pay his respects. They go, they find Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. They're in awe of Jesus, give him gifts of gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And then they dream. And their dream narrator tells them, don't go home through Jerusalem because that Herod is a really bad guy. There is a lot of dreaming in Matthew's story about Jesus' birth. And the dreams seem to function as interventions, ways to avoid catastrophes. The dreamers keep receiving premonitions. Joseph seems to have had a dream similar to what the wise men had experienced. The angel who appears in Joseph's dream lets him know that there's some serious trouble brewing and he needs to get the family out of the country and right now. It's a good thing that Joseph listened to his dream angel. Our lectionary portion today decided to spare us the next gruesome part, but I think it's important that we don't gloss over what happened next. Because the missing verses, Matthew 2:16 through 18, tell the vengeful campaign that jealous King Herod waged on families of Bethlehem. Herod was angry that the wise astronomers didn't spill the beans on the location of Jesus. So he decides to take drastic action to hunt down his rival. Not knowing exactly which boy under 2 years old had attracted the wise men's attention, Herod ordered all the Jewish boys 2 years old and younger to be killed. The church marks that day on the calendar, December 28th, as the Feast of the Holy Innocents, a remembrance of the reported 20-plus baby boys killed in Bethlehem. Children killed because of a tyrant's petty fears. Now, historically, there's no evidence that this massacre really happened, and even if Herod did order such a mass killing, his overall record is full of indiscriminate brutality toward the Jews, so this would have been just another bad deed by a really terrible man. But it speaks to the real dangers that existed in the world in which love came down at Christmas to dwell with us as one of us in the person of Jesus. It's still speaking to us in the world in which we are living today. Violence, especially violence against children, is still with us. We've all seen the images from the war-torn areas of the world, Gaza, Ukraine, Syria, Sudan, with indiscriminate killings of civilians and children being the most vulnerable victims. And even closer to home, we know that school shootings have become an all too frequent occurrence. In the same way the birth of a child represents hope, the death of a child can feel like a devastating blow to hope. It's into times and places and moments such as this that Jesus enters the world and depends upon the faithful actions of human participants to pay attention to the messengers in their dreams. Joseph did follow the dreams and did so despite it being a risky proposition. They left their homeland, the familiar. They were immigrants, refugees on the run into a foreign land. In fact, it was a land from which their ancestors had escaped from another tyrannical leader so many centuries earlier. How strange that must have been to find refuge in Egypt. We might imagine the stress of this situation, of how terrifying it must have been to flee from their country of origin. I've listened to many reports about the dangerous trek of people fleeing gang violence in Central America to seek refuge in our country. Just trying to get through an area called the Darien Gap which is both a swampland full of snakes as well as jungles and mountains, where marauders hang out waiting to attack people running for their lives, is a harrowing experience. That anyone makes it through there is actually really miraculous. The Holy Family's experience isn't as well documented, but we get the idea that, like today's refugees, they too could never fully rest because there was always danger around the corner. Even after Herod's death, Joseph was still listening to his dream narrator telling him not to go back to Judea. And so the family settled in the Galilean village of Nazareth. This story reminds us of how much it takes to keep hope alive. But that fragile and vulnerable hope is the Jesus that lives within each of us who have been brought through the waters of baptism and marked and sealed as Christ's own forever. And this Jesus, born in us, is the hope that we bring out into the world, to our families, to our workplaces, everywhere we go and encounter those faces of God seeking a meaningful connection. This hope is what fuels a dream of a world where there is health, healing, and hope with unconditional love. As we enter into the season of Epiphany, time of many great ahas, maybe a time where the Christ light in us grows brighter each day as we keep that fire of hope burning in our hearts. In the name of our one holy and undivided Trinity.